You're listening to the Future Tech Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies such as artificial intelligence, stem cells, 3D printing, gene editing, Bitcoin, blockchain, the microbiome, quantum computing, virtual reality, and exploring space are much closer than you might think. In fact, many early versions of these technologies are in play right now, and the companies that are using these technologies are the focus of this podcast. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a thorny medical problem. Remember, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and tell your friends about it. Thank you. Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech Podcast. My guest is Adria Recasens at the MIT Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. We're talking about a new AI system that deals with speech and object recognition all at once. So, Adria, thanks for coming. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. So, tell me about this AI system. How do you combine speech and object recognition? What's the whole premise of the thing?
So basically, this work started as an experiment to see if we could actually learn to match objects in images with the spoken words, which basically is the words that people use to describe objects. So the idea would be if you have someone describing an image, for us as a humans, is actually very easy to match the spoken word that people uses to describe particular objects. However, machines are not as good as us to do this without much information. So basically, we wanted to see if training a machine learning system to do this task, to basically match together descriptions of images with the images itself. The system would be able to actually learn some of the relations. So basically, we were asking ourselves, okay, if we give it 500,000 of images with its corresponding descriptions, is the system going to learn how a person looks like, or how a ball looks like, or how a tree looks like? So that's the basic premise of the work, to just use raw audio signal. So there is a lot of work in computer vision and basically in technology using text, but we wanted to tackle the system just from the raw audio perspective. So we use raw audio signal, we use a large data set of images, and we had a lot of people describing these images for us, and basically we train a system to learn these correspondences between the images and the descriptions.
So I would look at a picture and I would say, hey, Adria, you see that in the bottom left corner, that purple thing that's a little bit shiny? It looks like a square, laying on its side or something. I would do something like that, and the system would listen to me describe the object, and then it would label it and identify it.
Yeah, basically the idea is that if you have a picture and you say exactly like, oh, there is a chair next to the table in the center of the image, the system should be able to tell you, okay, you're talking about this part of the image, about this chair. And it's actually learning what chair means, because that's basically the only way it has to do this, to do the matching between the image and the speech, is to understand the relation between what the objects you are describing and how they look like in the image. So we actually do some analysis on how many objects the system learn and how do they learn it. So basically, which kind of objects are the best ones for the system to ground these spoken words in the image. But yeah, basically, the basic use case is you describe some parts of the image, and the system learns to tell you, okay, you're actually talking about this part or these other parts of the image.
So what would be the use of this? I could see it maybe if you're presenting to someone, instead of drawing over an image, you can describe stuff. But what would be the reason to have something like this? Would you catalog, X-rays of patients, have doctors talk about it, or how would you use it?
So I think there are a lot of different uses. One use would be, it's kind of a fastest way for annotation. So in computer vision, there is this problem where basically we have to annotate data sets, large data sets, and usually what people do is we either draw bounding box into the image, or we annotate, describe it with text. But describing images with audio is actually way cheaper because you just actually ask someone, okay, can you describe it? They take 10 seconds describing it, and next image. So and then we showed actually you were able to use this information to leverage the content of the image corresponding to the audio. So actually you can learn from there, which means you have a cheaper way to annotate. At the same time, we wanted to see on whether you could actually learn. So it's more of an experiment itself on can we actually learn these groundings between audio and image, and it seems to be working fairly well. And then you can also think about systems that assist humans, so either in cars or at home, or basically robots of all different kinds, where you describe a particular object that the robot is seeing just with your voice, and the system is able to actually pick it up and say, okay, you're talking about this object and I have to do something with that. And this something could be, so you say, okay, open the light next to the table in the living room, or it could be just, okay, bring me the glass of water next to the chair and leave it here. So all these reference, spatial reference in our speech can be actually captured by the system and be used for, let's say, robots to make use of it and help humans. So I think there are a lot of different variations of applications. These are some that I think are cool and interesting.
So you would train a system with what? With your particular way of describing things, or would you want to have a pre-trained system that a new person could just start using and it would work?
Yeah, you can imagine different scenarios where, either you have a pre-trained system with a lot of general descriptions, or if you want to go into a particular setting that is very specific, like, I don't know, you have a very particular way of describing things, you could just describe. So with a very wide pre-trained system, you can kind of retrain your system for your particular needs with your particular way of describing things. So the idea is that the system is able to ground speech with whatever it's seeing in an image. So you could use that either from data that you train from like a lot of people, or your own data if you want your system to keep learning about how you describe things. So there are a lot of different settings that could be interesting here, yeah.
So where is this being used right now, or is it in an early stage of development?
So this is an early stage of development. We did start a project to understand the relation between the human speech and the images when people was describing stuff. And basically, the idea at this point, so we started with this idea of, okay, if you are giving a lot of images and descriptions to this machine learning system, is it actually going to learn to detect these particular objects, and is it going to learn to relate them to the spoken word that it's being used? And we found so, and then we are actually exploring potential uses of the system or potential extensions or improvements of the system so that it could actually work better, it could work in different settings. So I think there are a lot of cool explorations, like would it work in different languages? Can you use it to learn languages, to learn different languages and relate them? So there are a lot of things that could be done with the system. And we're just, so this is actually, there are a few 3 or 4 publications about this. And we hope to grow this and to start learning more about how the system works and improving it.
Well, how would it help you learn a language? How would that work? Is that if you don't speak the native language, that you could describe things and it would still work and show the objects? I mean, how do you envision this would work?
So you can imagine, for instance, so there are a couple of use cases. One interesting and cool one is for languages that don't have written form. So there's a lot of languages in the world where you can actually not write in the language because they don't have written form. It's only like spoken. So this system would actually capture some of this. It would create this, it would learn basically to relate whatever the person is saying in the audio waveform to the objects in the image. So you would be able to create some kind of dictionary between the spoken words, the phonetics, and whatever is in the image. So that's one option. And the other one is that you can imagine that the way for the system to learn the language is just you describing stuff. So that's actually, so in some sense, the system is learning words in English. Like when we are giving it 500,000 image descriptions, and it's people saying, oh, there is a girl next to a lighthouse, or there is a sheep in a field. It's learning to detect and to ground into the image all these concepts. So it's kind of learning very basic notion of English. So you could imagine that if somehow you use this basic super training with English, and then you want to specialize in some other language, you could start like describing stuff in a different language, and the system should start learning this different language.
I gotcha. So what platforms would this be on? Would this be an app on a smartphone eventually? Or would it have to be on a desktop first, or what do you envision?
So I think we're not thinking that far at this point. We are just in an exploration phase. This is a research project. We want to understand the system itself first. We want to understand its weaknesses, its strong points, and we want to basically try to make it better so that it can understand more things in the image. There are a lot of open, nice directions to go where basically you can, so right now it's good at detecting objects, but we have also been exploring, and actually we have a publication about this on the system learning attributes. So can you learn what red means, what blue means, what big means, what small means? So I think this is a line that we are interested in, but at this point we're not considering how to create an app, or we have a demo which is nice, but it's just for our own use and to see how the system works. But I think, we are not discussing any possible form at this point.
What would be your ideal, in the next few years? What would you love to see happen with this?
So I think I would love to see robots understanding speech in a natural way. And basically interacting with humans through voice, kind of without needing any particular help. Like I would love to see systems that trained in our settings where either you are at home and you refer to something at home, and basically your automated home acts on it, like opens a light or brings the robot that you have at home brings you something. Or I would like your car to do the same, like basically understand whatever you're saying and interact with you. So I think there are a lot of potential uses with this, like speech interaction with machines, and that's, I think, a very good start. And we showed that the system is able to detect very well some particular objects. In the follow-up, we show that we are able to detect some attributes and some attributes basically. So I think language is very complex. This is the beginning, and I would love to see how we are actually improving our understanding of spoken language. And with that, we are actually impacting then how these applications that interact with humans work, because if you have a better understanding of spoken language, you can actually basically interact better with humans.
That's true. Okay. I guess the focus is not on describing things in an image, but on training the system to the point where any spoken command or description will be much more accurate, whether a robot implemented or a device. Let's say Siri and Alexa had this advanced, AI recognition. I mean, it would be a lot more powerful if you could speak to them. Well, you can't speak to them. It would be a lot more powerful on what they could do for you, because they would understand far more.
Yeah, so I think part of the point that we are trying to convey in this work is that with a spoken language you can learn a lot, and of course systems at this point are very good at like parsing your speech and using it, but at the same time I think we make a point by only learning through speech, so that this is something you can imagine in the future. If we improve the way and the amount of data you need for learning, you can imagine systems that train this way are able to, as you are mentioning, interact with humans and basically enable this possibility of grounding particular words with objects in the image or something like that. And actually, I think it's also relevant in the sense that if the system keeps learning, it could learn your particular language of that you use at home, which is not necessarily the same as some other people use language to refer to things at home. So basically, you could specialize every of these devices on how a particular person talks or the way they mention things, and I think that would be useful as well.
Well, very good. So what's the best way for people to learn more about this and your work and maybe to get in contact?
So, we have a website for the project. They can download the code if they want to play with it. They can download the data if they want to train things with that. They have, my email, of course, is there, and the other authors' email. So if people is interested on that, if they want to chat about this, just email us, and we'll be happy to chat, to discuss, and to learn more about their thoughts about this.
All right, very good. Well, Adria, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks to you for inviting me.
You're listening to the Future Tech Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies such as artificial intelligence, stem cells, 3D printing, gene editing, Bitcoin, blockchain, the microbiome, quantum computing, virtual reality, and exploring space are much closer than you might think. In fact, many early versions of these technologies are in play right now, and the companies that are using these technologies are the focus of this podcast. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a thorny medical problem. Remember, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and tell your friends about it. Thank you.